from that piece of music. And I was driving down the highway, and I heard a song. It's amazing how things happen. Came over the radio, and I was listening to it, and I thought, if God could have written a song, it would have been this one.
Hold on to me as we roll down this unfamiliar road. And although this way is straight or slow, just know you're not alone, 'cause I'm gonna make this place your home.
Good song, right? Now, can you not imagine that a young carpenter from Nazareth heading off into the desert and feeling all these temptations and all the things that we heard about in Scripture today would not have heard that song? Settle down. No matter what demons you face, what fears you have, you're not alone. I'm going to make this place your home. It's an interesting take on the whole Lenten temptation thing, isn't it? We're at the beginning of Lent, and in the church world, this becomes the time of denial. You have to give stuff up, right? You have to face all these things you're supposed to do in Lent, where we're supposed to be more pious and more pure, give up all the things that tempt us and distract us. All based on a scripture that really doesn't say that. It's a scripture that says something else, and I'm going to come to that in a moment, but how I want to get there is by asking you, who's giving up stuff for Lent? Many people decided to give up chocolate this year, or the extra cigarette behind the shack out back of work, or people all have those things, right? I decided to give something up this year. I know, I did. I chose to give up something this year. I decided to give up on giving up. And I'm serious. Jesus went into the wilderness and had all these experiences that we hear about, where he's being shown the heights, and you can look at this, and the depths, and you can look at that, and convert this into bread, do all these things, all these temptations. But I wouldn't call them temptations. I would call them challenges to insight. Because I don't believe that the time of the 40 days of Lent that we talk about is meant to be about some sort of piety or self-denial. I do believe it's a call to another way of living, another way of life. How many people here in their younger days, or still do, like to go camping? How many people here have gone hunting? Some have. How many people have been bird watching? If you ever know, do you know what you need to do when you're in any of those activities? You need to look, right? You need to be able to look. If you've ever gone into the woods with somebody hunting or bird watching, you know that you have to be able to read the signs, right? Follow the tracks, see what is there. Bird watchers are really good at a little function of being able to use their eyes, because you can stare at a pile of leaves, and I see a pile of leaves, and people who are acute bird watchers will see the wren or the thrush or the whatever it is in amongst that in the camouflage. They will be able to discern what's there. Look up into the branches of a tree, and I just see, branches and leaves, and they're seeing the bird in amongst it all. So it's about sight and insight. And I believe that's what was really happening with Jesus, was about insight, being able to look into the qualities and aspects of all of life and ask himself what was the important things for him to know there. What was the learnings there? What was the truth? What was really in front of him? Now we tend to live without seeing, even though we have, I don't think there's anybody here who's officially blind. Some of us are wearing glasses to correct our lenses. So, I know that you all walked in the building today and you were using your eyes. So I'm going to ask you to tell me, without looking backwards, what the back wall looks like. What's on it? Does anybody know how many plaques or pictures are back there? What features and furniture there is?
There's a map of the cemetery out back.
Yep.
There's a list of all the people who have passed on with a little gold nameplate.
Yep. And the rest?
There's a table with Tim Bits and coffee.
Yes, everybody knows the table with Timbits and coffee. There's actually beyond the two things that Phillip mentioned, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 other plaques.
Collection plate.
Pardon me?
Collection plate.
There's collection plates, there's 2 windows, there's a very large model of the church. There's 3 tables back there. There's a special table holding the memorial book. There's all kinds of stuff, you see it, but it doesn't register. That's the way most of our lives are. We don't register what's going on in our own lives. We don't register what's happening. We don't look at the details and the insights of our own lives. And what Jesus was doing supposedly in this time of temptation was really what I would call a retreat. He had pulled himself away from the everyday, ordinary things of his life, and he was taking a look at it all in some depth, with some consciousness of all of the details of his life, and what was of value and what was worth keeping and what was necessary to let go of. Because in life, what is the temptation? In the Aramaic world, lead us not into temptation is actually not an external thing, it's an internal thing. It's a thing in which we look at whether or not I have my rudder working. Am I steering the right course in my life? Am I doing what I should be doing? Or am I simply responding to all the external stimuli around me? All the you should have and you must do, and maybe it would be good if you did, and all those other comments that people can make about us, and those things that, well, we don't do it that way, or that's not the way it's done in this community, or that's not our way of doing things here, or we've never done it that way before. You know the statements and phrases that have shaped your life? What are you going to be when you grow up? I don't know. Maybe nothing. Can you imagine answering that question that way years ago? I can't ask that question to people because I haven't decided what I want to be when I grow up yet. But it gets asked all the time, right? It's one of those things that what shapes us, what forms us. And it gets to the point we don't see it anymore. We get up in the morning, and if you're like me, we get up in the morning and I wake up 3 hours after I get up, which is very difficult. And you start to, that glazed overlook. Watch people. And look at that. It scares me when you look into the eyes of some of the commuters. I'm thinking, they're not awake yet. They're driving and they don't know where they are. And I'm going to ask this question to all the people here in the room who are drivers and ask you to answer it honestly. Have you ever left on a trip and gotten to the end of the journey, say an hour's drive, and gotten there and you can't remember every moment of the drive? You actually phased out at some point in time? You drifted off into some other mental state? You drove that far without being conscious of where you were and what you were doing? Honest now. Sad truth of life is that's the way we live our lives. It's not just the drive. We live our lives that way, completely unconscious to all there is around us and within us. We don't know our own potential. We don't know what it is we are called to do. We have just phased out. So what people really are doing as we come to this time of the 40 days of preparing to meet God is actually beginning that examination of where God fits in my life. What is my relationship with God? How do I work? How does it live within me? How do I live it outside of me? How do I make my life full and alive in faith and with God and with others? It's never about giving up. It was never about self-denial. It was about self-awareness. It's about understanding what it is that makes me tick. What causes me to lose my own sense of direction? What causes me to let the rudder wander in ways that my life drifts around aimlessly? How do I lose my sense of purpose? And when you start to think about that, pretty soon you're not focusing on what you didn't do. You're focusing on what you can do, what you're capable of, what it means to make your world and life work. Jesus didn't go into the desert to come out feeling guilty. He went into the desert to examine his life and come out more energized for living. We tend to use our faith to make ourselves feel guilty. Oh, I should have. I could have. I might have done. God expected me to, but I can't live up to it. These are all the things I've heard over the years from people who tell me they are people of good faith. We're about to celebrate communion, which I think is really appropriate on the first week of Lent as we begin the time of examining our lives, becoming aware of all that we can be and all that we can do. I had a gentleman in Cape Breton in my congregation who I can't remember him ever missing church, ever. I can't remember ever a time in which this gentleman did not respond to some call for good deeds and good works in the community. If there was a need, he was there. And I spoke with others, and he was in his late 60s at the time. No one could ever remember a negative thing about this person, and he had never missed church. He was one of those faithful, rock-solid, Christian people of the community. And at no time does anybody ever remember him taking communion. He would never take communion. I'm the only one who ever had enough nerve to approach him about it, me being me. So one day I went to his house and I said, Neil, I've been here for 2 years and you haven't taken communion once. And he says, no, I never take communion. And I said, why not? He said, I'm not good enough. He didn't think he was good enough. He had the total and utmost respect of every individual in the community and wouldn't take communion because he didn't think he was good enough. And he didn't think he was good enough because he had been told as a young boy he wasn't. And he had never taken the time to examine his own life and to realize he was. How many others can say the same thing? I can think of hundreds who feel the same way. That they have reached a point in their life where they don't feel good enough, capable enough, redeemed enough. Self-examination means examining yourself in the light of God and understanding that the God that loves you, cares for you, and gives you all the goodness you need. But you have to be able to see it. And again, it comes back to that sight or insight. Open yourselves up to the insights that are within you. The life that is yet there to yet be shared, and the will to do, the song that will beautify your life with others. Open yourselves up to all those things that are of God, with God within you. See it. It's not so hard to see when you're willing to take the moment to stop and look and listen. You want to find God? Then you have to go to your own desert. And your own desert isn't outside of yourself. It's that barren place within that you've locked away out of fear that others might know it was there. And you have to face God there and understand that even there your stones will sing.